Hi, I'm Jackie Bobak. I teach voice at CalArts. I'm the head of the voice program. I'm also assistant dean and also have a performing career both here and outside of CalArts. I sing all over the place. I do a lot of stuff in Europe, throughout the States. I do mostly very experimental music. My background is at least all my schooling was more in very traditional classical training, and that's what I work on with my students here in terms of developing a good and healthy vocal technique. But my own artistic practice is much more on the very experimental side of things. I often refer to myself as a sort of a mutant singer because I don't fit in any particular category. I do everything ranging from new opera to new chamber music to works that have a lot of improvisation to works that have alternate tuning systems to working with extended vocal techniques. I also compose a little bit myself, and recently I've been getting into more collaborative composition or collaborative relationships, doing a lot of interdisciplinary work, and always trying to push the envelope and see what's new and what's coming up. But I still also sing some Bach and Mozart and Schubert every now and then. In potential students, we usually look for somebody who's really open-minded, I think, first of all, and somebody who has maybe a more experimental spirit. Of course, we look for some kind of talent, but particularly with singers, since voices develop so late, we look for raw talent, not necessarily a finished product, and somebody who has really an open and engaging mind, I think, first and foremost. Well, obviously, we look for music that's well-learned and well-prepared in terms of auditions. We also look for some kind of spirit in the actual performance. A lot of times it's hard to codify that in any way, but it's looking for that spark in someone and also looking for what you hear in the future in the vocal development. Because oftentimes it may be one or two notes that you hear and you say, ah, that's where the voice is going. And so we'll sometimes admit somebody based on one or two notes that they happen to sing and their inquisitive spirit. We try to prepare singers for all kinds of possibilities. CalArts is a very eclectic place, and students do a wide variety of things. We try to, in the voice program, give them the tools to have a really solid technique so that they know their instrument, so that they know they've built their instrument, they know their instrument, they know what it can do, they know its current limits, and then let that development sort of lead to some kind of path for them. And students come out of here doing a wide variety of things. Some have straight ahead opera careers, some sing early music, some sing in the Cirque du Soleil, some have their own bands, and some become composers, some do interdisciplinary work. So there's a huge variety of things that students do. And we feel that singers these days need to be very versatile, and they have to have all of these different tools at their disposal, and so that they can shift among styles. So it's not unusual to have somebody here, studying the blues, but also having the lead in one of our operas, and also doing Baroque chamber music, and then also composing and having their own band, and but with not letting the quality suffer, because everything has to be done well. But I think the days of singers who have one very strong career path or one idea of a possible career are fading away.
Why is that?
I think part of it is because our whole society is changing, and we're so much more of a global culture too, and there's so much more access to things, and there's not as much support sometimes financially for having this, more of a straight ahead career path. And there are a lot of people out there trying to have that traditional career path. But I think it's part of our just the way our society is developing, and this multiplicity of things that's going on all the time. Having music from other cultures, I think, is just, it's in a way it helps us embrace a more global culture. It helps us understand other cultures. I think that it's a great thing for children to travel, because you learn so much just from seeing how people live in other cultures. And so for studying music from other cultures, there are other skills that you gain, not only just from learning about the culture, but for instance, you might learn different tuning systems, which singers are called upon all the time these days, even in Western classical music, to sing in new tuning systems. You learn other stronger rhythmic skills. You learn other types of discipline. You learn to learn in a different way, because a lot of the non-Western music that we do here is not notated music, so you have to develop the ear in a much stronger way. And students who end up composing their own music end up oftentimes incorporating various elements from other musical cultures. And even in voice, when we talk about learning extended vocal techniques, a lot of those are extended only in terms of Western classical culture. They're not extended in terms of world culture. They come from, Mongolian or throat singing or various other cultures where they're not extended at all. They're just extended in the sort of bel canto Western classical art music tradition. The voice faculty focuses primarily on technique, on building the instrument, because I think this is something that singers can't start making their instrument until they're a bit older, because they have to have the physical development. So we have to make the instrument, and then we have to learn to play it. So there's not a ready-made instrument. And every time the singer opens their mouth, they're learning to make their instrument again, depending on what vowel they're singing. We're adjusting constantly all the resonating cavities. So we focus mainly in voice lessons on making the instrument, somewhat on musical development and repertoire. But the students here also study with a coach who deals primarily with coaching repertoire and helping them with musical decisions in the repertoire. We start off using scales and exercises, various vocalises, but then we use repertoire that the students are working on and break it apart and use that as technical exercises. So somebody might not sing ever all the way through a piece in a lesson, but we'll break it apart, make a vocalise out of parts of it that are difficult, work on various things, the tongue position or the mouth position or whatever within the context of the piece. So kind of separating in a way the musical aspects from the actual technical aspects. I think that all the faculty here are pretty traditional in terms of the way that we teach technical aspects of singing and teach technique, because we all come from very traditional backgrounds. And I think that of course, there are many different schools of thought about how you teach voice, but there are certain scientific principles that are just fact that one must deal with. And so I don't think there's anything non-traditional in the actual teaching of technique or making the voice. Of course, every individual instructor has their own way of teaching, and we like to really deal with the individual. At CalArts, the singers do not come out sounding all like each other. It's not a factory in that sense. They don't come out sounding like their teacher. We try to build on the individual voice and really use our eyes and our ears to guide us in teaching them. And the students all sound quite different and have their own unique voices, which they should, because everybody has a different body and a different personality. And sometimes we have to encourage students to find their own uniqueness, because they often have a set idea of what they should sound like or what they want to sound like or what kind of voice they would like to have. And we have to guide them more towards the voice they do have and finding strengths within that particular voice, and knowing. I mean, part of teaching is I think guiding the student to know their own strengths and also know their own weaknesses. And this ties in also with building a career. You really need to know what you're good at and what you're not so good at, and don't, try to go a different route than you may have skill for. And same thing with the voice training. We have a mixture of requirements that all students have to learn a certain amount of repertoire and a certain number of languages per semester, but we try to gear that choice of repertoire toward the individual student, and we also make exceptions. If we feel somebody needs to take a step back and work only on technique, then we're not so concerned with getting through all of the repertoire. They have recital requirements that require certain types of, there are certain parameters for what that should be, but we also like to sometimes throw that out if that's not appropriate for a student. If we have a student who comes in and wants to do a lot of interdisciplinary stuff and they have the vocal skills developed to be able to do this other kind of creative work, then a recital won't necessarily be a traditional recital, but it'll be more of an event of some kind. I think that singers need to have a good grasp of history in terms of how things might have been performed originally and what could be expected in terms of style, and their languages obviously need to be very good. They need to understand what they're singing. Certain students can more intuitively pick up some of this because they happen to be maybe a little bit more innately musical, and they can grasp immediately what a composer is trying to convey in a piece, and they can then convey that themselves. But other students have to have more of a background in theory, or more of an understanding that comes from a different direction to get the same results. But I think that they need to have the background laid and know where if they're going off in a different direction, they need to know where they've been or where the tradition has been. Well, to listen, and I also think that there's that studying music seriously, one learns so much more than just by listening. But the process of being in school and also being in school for a longer period of time, I think it's pretty hard to just do a bachelor's degree and come out, and especially as a singer, because you can't start training until you're a bit later on, that it's hard to come out and be musically mature enough to have a career or to be vocally mature enough. So it's listening, it's exposure, it's studying things in a classroom sense, it's attending as many concerts as possible, listening to as many recordings, just that kind of exposure, and then the more in-depth training and understanding that one develops from studying theory longer, or gaining more musical skills, or studying history or literature. It's pretty hard to be just a singer. Singers at least have to be involved in the study of literature, I think, and poetry. Also, preferably understanding other things in historical context. Singers also, whether anyone likes it or not, they need to be able to have a certain physical presence on the stage. They need to have a certain theatrical presence, need to have some background in just how to move, and how to deliver something. Even though there are pieces where the singer becomes much more an instrument, there's still this way of looking at a singer as being someone who has to have a bit more theatrical presence. And I think that actually one thing that's happening more at CalArts is that instrumentalists are also moving in that direction more, where they have to think about the overall picture and the theatrical aspects of their performance as well. I think it's just that trying to live your life creatively and doing everything creatively, and the fact that you never know what's around the corner. And that, I mean, life in general is change, constant change. And I think being an artist allows you to embrace that change in your work as well as in your life. And it's very exciting to kind of not... For so long, I think I always used to try to define myself too much. I'm this, I'm that. And it's much more freeing to give up on that and trying to and also to stop trying to define where things are going and just go. If someone's trying to decide whether they should be a creative artist, if they should go that route, I guess first of all, this is assuming that they have some talent. I would ask them if they feel like they have to do it, because in the creative life, there are times when you really hate it. You just, you've got to do this piece, or you've got to do this or that, and it can be a real struggle. Or if you're struggling with technical issues, it takes so much perseverance and so much diligence and discipline. And if one doesn't have the sense of that they have to do it and there's nothing else that they could do, then, and if they don't have a lot of discipline, then it's probably not the right career path. Doesn't mean that they can't study music, but it may not be the right path, because I'm definitely of the school that having a career is about 99% hard work and about 1% talent. And I've seen it again and again where students who I've thought were not maybe the most talented students bypassed very talented students by their hard work and are doing very well. I have conversations with parents all the time, especially, when you deal with, okay, we're going to sink this much money into this education, and what is my child going to do? And I try to encourage parents to if their child really wants to do this and has the discipline and has the talent, to let them follow that path and see where it leads them, and not to get to be involved in the process and not think so much of the end result, because people's paths change all the time, particularly if they're very open-minded, which is one of the things that we look for. That one might think they're going to start out and they're going to have a career in Broadway or something, but then the more they're exposed to more musical styles and musical worlds, they could end up being a performance artist or taking a completely different turn. So I think that the parents as well as the students need to keep the process in mind and stay focused on the process and let the path unfold, because it almost always does for those students who put in the work. They find their path, and often it's a path that we never would have dreamed of.